I'm Isaac, 27, and I've always been the odd one out in my family. Not because I was rebellious or caused trouble, but because I didn't fit their mold. My parents, especially my dad, built their lives around appearances. Every family photo, every holiday, every word that left their mouths seemed rehearsed, meant for an audience. My older sister, Lydia, fit right in. She was the golden example, polished, confident, and perfectly attuned to the tone my parents expected. I was quieter, more reserved, and, as my mom once phrased it, not quite the family type. I used to think she meant I wasn't social enough. Later, I realized she meant I didn't play the part. My dad's 60th birthday dinner was supposed to be a family affair, as my mom put it, something meaningful and intimate. She made a big deal out of inviting everyone weeks in advance. Lydia and her fiancé, a few of Dad's business friends, even my cousin Joel, who barely showed up to anything unless there was free food or networking involved. I wasn't going to go at first. After the last few years, I'd grown used to keeping my distance. But when Dad called personally and said, "It would mean a lot to me if you came," I agreed. I told myself maybe, just maybe, things could be different. The restaurant they chose was one of those upscale places where the lighting is dim and the menus don't list prices. I arrived early, which turned out to be my first mistake. My family was already there, all smiles and laughter, glasses clinking. Lydia spotted me and waved me over, but it was the kind of wave you give someone you barely know. She leaned across the table, her perfume sharp and floral, and said, "You made it. I told Dad you might flake." I smiled anyway and sat down at the only empty chair, on the far end, slightly separated from the rest. Dad looked good for 60, broad-shouldered, confident, the kind of man who filled a room even when he wasn't talking. When he saw me, his expression softened. "There's my boy," he said. "Did you find the place all right?" I nodded, trying to ignore Lydia's smirk. Dinner started out fine. The conversation swirled around business, Lydia's new promotion, Dad's plans for retirement. Every time I tried to add something, mentioning my small graphic design studio or the fact that I'd recently landed a client overseas, it got brushed off. Lydia would glance at her fiancé and say something like, "That's cute, Isaac's doing his little projects again," before changing the subject. My parents didn't correct her. They never did. I'd grown used to it, but that night it stung more than usual. Maybe it was because I'd actually been doing well lately, finally making enough to stand on my own. Maybe it was because Dad had sounded so genuine on the phone when he said he wanted me there. Whatever it was, I tried not to show it. I just smiled and sipped my water while they ordered bottles of wine and laughed about people I didn't know. Halfway through the meal, Lydia started a story about her engagement party, the one I hadn't been invited to. She was describing the decorations and the champagne tower when she stopped mid-sentence, turned to me, and said, "Oh, that's right. You didn't come, did you? Or were you not invited?" Her tone was teasing, but the look in her eyes was sharp, deliberate. Mom chuckled softly, the way she always did when Lydia said something cutting. "Don't start, Lydia," she said, but she was smiling. Dad shook his head, more amused than annoyed. "Let's not pick on Isaac," he said, though he didn't really sound serious. "He's here now, that's what matters." The rest of the table laughed lightly, like it was all harmless fun. I forced a smile and said nothing. When the waiter came around to take dessert orders, Lydia leaned over and said, "You're quiet tonight, little brother." Not feeling talkative. I shrugged. "Just listening." She tilted her head, her eyes glinting in the candlelight. "You've always been more of an observer, haven't you? Not really one of us." That line hung in the air. I heard it echo louder than the chatter around us. "Not really one of us." She said it casually, almost sweetly, but everyone at the table went quiet for a beat too long. Then Dad laughed to break the tension. "Come on now, Lydia. Don't be rude." I waited for someone to disagree with her, for Mom to step in and say something kind. But no one did. They just laughed it off and went back to their wine. I smiled faintly and excused myself to the restroom, more to breathe than anything else. Staring at my reflection in the mirror, I wondered why I'd come. I looked tired. My tie felt too tight, my suit a little out of place in this room full of people who'd long decided where I stood. I told myself I'd make it through dessert, say happy birthday, and leave quietly. When I got back, the waiter was carrying out a large cake, 3 layers, frosted and decorated with gold details. Everyone clapped as Dad stood for a toast. Glasses were raised, and Lydia began speaking first, naturally. "To the best father anyone could ask for," she said, looking radiant under the soft lighting. "For everything you've done for us, me, Mom, even Isaac." A few laughs. "You've taught us what family means." Then Joel spoke, then Dad's business partner, then Mom. One by one, they stood, glasses lifted, words flowing easily. No one looked my way. I waited for a pause, for someone to say, "Isaac, do you want to say something?" But the pause never came. When the laughter died down, Lydia leaned toward me again. "You're not going to say anything?" she asked quietly. "Or maybe you just don't have anything to toast about?" I stared at my glass for a moment. "Guess not," I said. The table erupted in chatter again, moving on like nothing had happened. I sat there, pretending to be absorbed in the flame of the candle in front of me, when the waiter suddenly tapped my shoulder. He looked hesitant, polite. "Excuse me, sir," he said softly. "Your family asked if you could handle your part of the bill separately. Should I bring it to you now?" I blinked. "What?" "They mentioned you'd be paying for yourself tonight." For a second, I couldn't even respond. The noise around me dulled. I glanced toward my family. They were still laughing, glasses raised, oblivious. Lydia was showing her engagement ring to Dad's friend, her hand glittering in the light. I nodded slowly. "Yeah," I said to the waiter. "Go ahead. Bring me my check." When he left, I looked at them one more time. They didn't even notice. Something in me shifted then, not anger exactly, but a deep, final clarity. I paid my bill, folded the receipt neatly, and stood. The chair scraped lightly against the floor, catching Lydia's attention for the first time in what felt like hours. She frowned. "You're leaving?" I smiled. "Yeah, I think I've stayed long enough." Dad turned, startled. "Wait, don't go," he called as I started walking toward the door. But I didn't look back. And as I stepped outside into the cool night air, one thought settled in my mind, steady and sharp. This was the last time I'd ever be the outsider in my own family's story. Because next time, when they called my name, it wouldn't be for a dinner. It would be for something they never saw coming. The days after that dinner felt strangely quiet. I went home expecting to feel angry, but what I really felt was hollow, like something had finally burned itself out inside me. I didn't text my dad back when he sent a half-hearted, "Sorry about the confusion with the bill, son." Confusion. That's what he called it. Lydia hadn't said a word, of course. Neither had Mom. The silence told me everything. I wasn't part of their world anymore, at least, not in any way that mattered to them. Still, I kept going. I buried myself in work, focusing on the design studio I'd built from scratch. It wasn't much when I started, but by then, I had a small team, a few loyal clients, and a reputation that was finally taking off. I'd poured everything into it, late nights, weekends, even skipped meals. That business wasn't just a company. It was proof I could stand on my own. A few months passed. I didn't see much of my family, except through Lydia's endless stream of social media posts, photos of brunches, spa weekends with Mom, and smiling group shots where my absence was never mentioned. Sometimes Dad would call, usually when he needed help with something techie, or just a quick favor for his company. I helped when I could, but each time I hung up, I felt like I'd given a little more of myself to people who didn't value it. Then one morning, out of nowhere, Lydia called. "Isaac, I need your help with something." Her voice was overly bright, the way it always got when she wanted something. "Morning to you too," I said flatly. "Sorry, yeah, morning. So, Dad's planning a retirement event next month, and I'm in charge of the presentation. You know, photos, videos, some kind of slideshow thing. I figured since you're creative, maybe you could put it together?" I almost laughed. The last time I'd been at one of Dad's family events, I'd been humiliated in front of everyone. But now that she needed something, suddenly I was creative. "I'm kind of busy," I said. "Oh, come on," she insisted. "It's not a big deal. Just a few clips, some music. You'd be helping Dad, not me." Helping Dad. That phrase did it. Despite everything, I still wanted to believe he cared. So I sighed and said, "Fine. Send me what you have." Over the next few days, I worked on it between client projects. Lydia sent me a folder full of old family photos and grainy video clips, vacations, birthdays, business milestones. I noticed there weren't many with me in them. In fact, in the few that included me, I was often standing in the background, barely visible. I mentioned it jokingly in a text. "Not a lot of me in these, huh?" She replied with a laughing emoji and said, Guess you were camera shy. I finished the project anyway. When I sent the final version to Lydia, she replied, "Looks great. Dad's going to love it." For a moment, I let myself feel proud. Maybe, I thought, this could be a small step toward making things better. A week later, I got a call from one of my clients, a corporate firm I'd recently signed with for a major branding project. The tone in their voice was tense. "Isaac, we need to talk about something," the manager said. "We saw some of your work featured at a recent event, and it looks like it was credited to someone else. Are you working with another agency now?" My stomach dropped. "What event?" "The Thompson and Company Retirement Gala. The presentation you made. It had your design style all over it. But the credits listed visual direction, Lydia Myers." I froze. Lydia had used my work, every image, every transition, every second of that slideshow, and put her name on it. After the call ended, I sat at my desk for a long time, staring at the computer screen. I opened the email I'd sent her, the one with the file attached, and saw that she'd forwarded it to her work address. I felt sick. I called her immediately. She picked up on the second ring, sounding cheerful. "Hey, what's up? What's up?" My voice was shaking. "You took my work. You put your name on it." There was a pause, then a dismissive laugh. "Oh, that. Isaac, it's not that deep. It was a family project. I just presented it on behalf of everyone." "On behalf of everyone," I repeated slowly. "It was my design, Lydia. You didn't even touch it." "Relax," she said. "You're overreacting. It's not like you were going to use it for anything. And it looked better with my name on it. Dad's friends know me, not you." That last part hit like a punch. "You stole my work to make yourself look good in front of Dad's business friends." "Don't be dramatic," she said sharply. "You always make everything about you. I asked you to help, and you did. That's what family does." I hung up before I said something I'd regret. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept replaying it in my head. The casual way she brushed it off, like my time and effort meant nothing. It wasn't even about the credit anymore. It was about respect. Every time I tried to stand on my own, Lydia found a way to knock me back down. And Dad, he let her. He always did. The next morning, Dad called. I almost didn't answer. "Isaac," he said warmly. "The presentation was fantastic. Lydia really outdid herself, huh?" I closed my eyes. "She didn't do it," I said quietly. "I did." There was a short silence, then a sigh. "Come on, son. Don't start. Lydia told me you helped a little, but she put it all together. Don't make this about credit." "It's not about credit," I said. "It's about honesty." Dad's tone hardened. "She did a great job, and everyone was impressed. You should be proud of your sister instead of picking a fight." "Proud," I said bitterly. "For stealing my work?" He hesitated for a moment, then said, "You always find a reason to feel left out, Isaac. Maybe it's time you stopped seeing yourself as the victim." That line broke something in me. I didn't respond. I just ended the call. For a while, I stayed quiet. I ignored Lydia's texts, Dad's calls, Mom's attempts at clearing the air. I threw myself into work again, but it was harder this time. Every time I looked at my computer screen, I thought about that stolen project, the laughter at the dinner, the way they all looked right through me. Then, about a month later, something happened that made everything worse. I was at a client meeting downtown when I got a call from a friend who worked at a marketing firm, someone I'd collaborated with before. "Hey, Isaac," she said cautiously. "I'm calling because I got a pitch from someone claiming to be your partner in a new design venture. I just wanted to check if that's legit." My heart sank. "Who was it?" "Lydia Myers. She said you two were expanding your business together and that she's handling client outreach now. She even used your portfolio in her pitch." I felt the blood drain from my face. "That's not true. She has nothing to do with my business." "I figured," my friend said. "I just thought you should know before this spreads. She's been emailing people, using your logo and everything." When the call ended, my hands were trembling. I went straight to my office and opened my inbox. Sure enough, there were messages from clients asking if I'd approved Lydia's new partnership announcement. She had used my branding, my designs, even my company's name. It wasn't a misunderstanding anymore. It was deliberate. I called her again. She didn't pick up. I tried texting, emailing, nothing. Then I got a message from Dad. "Lydia told me you're upset about the new business arrangement," it read. "You should be grateful she's helping you reach new clients. This could be good for you." Grateful. The word made my stomach turn. That evening, I drove to my parents' house without calling first. When Mom opened the door, Her face lit up for a second before freezing when she saw my expression. Isaac, what's wrong? Where's Lydia? I asked. They were all in the living room. Mom, Dad, Lydia, and her fiancé. They looked up in surprise when I walked in. Lydia's expression shifted instantly from startled to smug. Well, this is unexpected, she said. Didn't think you'd actually show up. What are you doing? I asked, my voice low. You used my company name. You're contacting my clients. She rolled her eyes. Oh, that. I told you, it's collaboration. You act like I stole your house or something. You're impersonating me, I said sharply. That's not collaboration. Dad stood, frowning. Enough, Isaac. Lower your voice. No, I said. I've been quiet long enough. I looked at Lydia. You're using my work, my name, and my reputation to get clients you couldn't earn yourself. Her fiancé laughed under his breath. Sounds like a business misunderstanding. It's theft, I said coldly. Dad crossed his arms. Watch your tone. She's trying to help you grow. I turned to him, stunned. Help me? She's sabotaging me. Lydia smiled sweetly. You always see things in the worst way, Isaac. I thought we could finally do something together as a family, but if you don't want that, fine. I'll keep the clients myself. That was the moment it clicked. They were never going to see me as their equal. No matter what I built, no matter how hard I worked, I'd always be the outsider, the one they could use when it suited them and discard when it didn't. I left without another word. As I stepped outside, the night air felt heavier than usual. My hands were still shaking, but my thoughts were clear. For the first few weeks after that night, everything in my life felt like it was unraveling. Word of Lydia's collaboration spread faster than I expected. A few of my regular clients hesitated to continue with me, confused about whether she was part of my company or not. One even said, "We just assumed she was your business manager." She sounded so professional. Professional. That word almost made me laugh. Lydia could charm anyone if she wanted to, especially people who didn't know what she was really like behind closed doors. The damage didn't stop there. She'd set up a fake website, my company name, my logo, even parts of my portfolio copied straight from my site. She'd replaced my bio with one that called her the creative director and founder. I sent her a message demanding she take it down. She didn't respond. When I called, she blocked me. I went to my parents again, hoping for support. I don't know why I expected anything different. Dad's voice was firm, almost rehearsed. Lydia told us you're overreacting again. She said she's just trying to expand what you started. She's impersonating me, I said. She's stealing clients, using my name. Mom cut in softly. Isaac, can't you two just work together for once? She's always been better at business, and you're the creative one. Maybe if you just... I interrupted, my patience gone. If I just let her take credit for everything, right? That's what you mean. Dad's jaw tightened. You've always been difficult, Isaac. Always so sensitive. She's trying to include you. I realized then that they weren't going to help. They never had. In their eyes, Lydia could do no wrong. She was their success story, the daughter who made them proud at dinner parties, the one who knew how to perform in public. And me? I was the one they tolerated, the quiet one they could use as a contrast to make her shine brighter. That night, I went home feeling like I'd lost everything. My business, my sense of belonging, my name, even. I sat in my small apartment, surrounded by sketches and half-finished designs, wondering if it was even worth continuing. But then something shifted. One of my clients, an older woman named Mrs. Patel, who owned a small local bakery, called me out of the blue. She'd been one of my first customers, back when my company was nothing but a desk in my bedroom. I heard about what's been happening, she said gently. Your sister contacted me too. I told her no. I only work with you, Isaac. I didn't realize how much I needed to hear that until my throat tightened. Thank you, I said quietly. She chuckled softly. You have talent, Beta. No one can take that from you. Start again if you have to. Sometimes losing something clears the path. Her words stuck with me. The next morning, I decided I wasn't going to let Lydia, or anyone, erase what I'd built. I took the website offline, started a new domain, rebranded everything under a fresh name. New logo, new style, new tone. It felt strange at first, like I was erasing part of myself. But as I worked, I realized I wasn't losing my identity. I was reclaiming it. I registered the new business name, filed for updated ownership documents, and even hired a lawyer to help me pursue Lydia for brand infringement. He warned me it might be complicated since she was family, but I told him I didn't care. Weeks turned into months. My business took a hit, but slowly, word began to spread again, this time the right way. I posted my projects on design forums, collaborated with small creators online, and built connections beyond my local circle. I focused less on impressing people and more on doing the kind of work that actually fulfilled me. It wasn't easy. There were nights when I questioned whether I was just fooling myself, whether Lydia had been right all along, that I'd never measure up. But then I'd get an email from a satisfied client or see one of my designs featured in a small business magazine, and that doubt would quiet down. What surprised me most was how freeing it felt to build something on my own terms. Without my family's expectations hovering over me, I finally had space to breathe. Still, Lydia's shadow wasn't gone. Every once in a while, I'd hear her name through mutual contacts. She'd landed a position as a marketing consultant, using connections Dad had given her. I also learned that she was still using elements of my old brand in her presentations, subtly implying that she'd been the creative force behind it. It hurt, but I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I kept working quietly, letting success grow slowly, like roots under the surface. By the time a full year had passed since that disastrous dinner, my new company was stable again. I had a small office space downtown, nothing fancy, but it was mine. I hired 2 interns and 1 part-time assistant, the kind of team I used to dream about. Then, one afternoon, I got a call from a representative at a major design conference. "Isaac Lane, we've been following your recent work, and we'd love to feature you as one of our guest speakers this year. Your rebranding campaign for small businesses really stood out to us." For a moment, I was speechless. "You mean as a speaker?" "Yes," she said. "Your story would inspire a lot of new designers, especially how you rebuilt your company after, well, everything that happened." I didn't ask how she knew about everything. News had a way of traveling. But I said yes. When the day of the conference arrived, I stood backstage, watching other presenters take the stage. My hands were shaking slightly, not from nerves, but from the realization of how far I'd come. A year ago, I'd walked out of that restaurant humiliated and invisible. Now, I was about to speak to a room full of people who wanted to hear my story. Afterward, people came up to shake my hand, to ask questions, to thank me. It was surreal. One woman said, "Your story reminded me of why I started creating in the first place." That night, I went home exhausted but lighter than I'd felt in a long time. The next morning, I woke up to something unexpected, an email from my father. It was short. "Isaac, congratulations on your talk. Lydia mentioned you've been doing well. We're proud of you. Maybe we can all get together soon, just like old times." Just like old times. The irony made me laugh out loud. I didn't respond. But apparently, that get-together wasn't a request, it was already in motion. A few days later, Mom called, cheerful and insistent. "Your father's planning a family dinner to celebrate. He says it's time to move forward. Everyone will be there. Lydia too." I wanted to say no. Every part of me screamed not to go. But a smaller part, the one that still wanted closure, said yes. When I arrived, the same familiar faces were there. Dad, Mom, Lydia, her fiancé, and a few family friends. The restaurant was fancy again, of course. The atmosphere felt eerily similar to that birthday dinner a year ago. Same kind of laughter, same smug expressions. But something was different this time. When I walked in, the hostess smiled and said, "Ah, Mr. Lane, your table is ready. The others are already seated." The way she said Mr. Lane, with recognition, made Lydia's expression flicker as I approached. Dad stood up and clapped me on the shoulder. "Isaac, there he is. We were just talking about your business. Lydia says you've been making waves lately." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "It's great to see you doing well," she said smoothly. "I always knew you'd figure things out eventually." I smiled back, calm, composed. "Yeah, it took a while, but I did." Throughout dinner, they asked polite questions about my company, though Lydia kept steering the conversation back to herself, her new job, her upcoming wedding, her big projects. I let her talk. Let them all talk. Because for once, I didn't need their approval. I wasn't sitting there hoping to belong. Still, something about Lydia's tone nagged at me. She kept hinting at a new partnership, something major that would change everything. She didn't name the client, but when she mentioned the industry, my stomach turned. It sounded too familiar. I didn't say anything then. I just listened carefully, every piece clicking together in my mind. When dessert came, she leaned over, just like she had that night a year ago, and whispered, "You've done well, Isaac. But I hope you don't forget who inspired you to start." I looked her straight in the eye and smiled faintly. "Don't worry," I said. "I remember everything." What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I already had proof of what she'd been doing again. This time, I'd been prepared. And soon, they were all going to see that I wasn't the quiet, naive one anymore. Months turned into years, and the silence between me and my family stretched like an ocean I had no desire to cross. I had learned to live with it, to breathe without their voices filling the air, to move without waiting for their approval. For the first time in my life, my worth didn't depend on being noticed by them. I had built something real, something that was mine alone. After leaving home, I'd started small, renting a cramped apartment with peeling paint and a single window that barely opened. But that room became my sanctuary. I worked long hours, saved every coin, and poured every ounce of frustration into my small business. The one they mocked, dismissed, and called a phase. The one they said I'd abandon once I realized how the real world works. The irony was almost poetic, because now, I was the real world they never believed in. My designs had caught attention online. Orders began to flood in, slowly at first, then in waves that kept me awake through the night. I remember the day I received my first large partnership offer, a collaboration that would pay more than my father's monthly salary had ever been. I didn't celebrate publicly. I didn't post about it. I just sat at my small desk, staring at the numbers on the screen, knowing exactly what this meant. They would regret ever doubting me. Still, I didn't reach out. I waited. I watched. And that patience became my greatest weapon. By the second year, I'd expanded. My name was starting to circulate in circles they'd once deemed too good for me. I hired a small team, people who believed in what I created, who didn't treat me like I was fragile or delusional. Every contract signed, every milestone reached, was a quiet rebellion against the years of humiliation they'd put me through. Then one morning, an email appeared in my inbox, an invitation to a prestigious local awards event, one that celebrated rising entrepreneurs and innovators in the region. I'd been nominated. My heart raced as I read the message again and again. It wasn't just recognition. It was validation, public and undeniable. And that's when I knew. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. But revenge, I'd learned, wasn't about shouting. It was about precision. It was about timing. I didn't want to confront them out of anger. Anger was messy, fleeting, and easy to dismiss. No, I wanted clarity. I wanted them to look me in the eye and see exactly what they threw away. I began preparing quietly. Every detail mattered. Every move had to be deliberate. I reached out to the event organizers to confirm my attendance. Then I asked, with a polite tone and a smile they couldn't see, if I could bring a few guests. They said yes. The guest list was open, and that was the final piece I needed. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, the glow from my computer casting light across the documents spread out before me. Old family photos, scans of text messages where they dismissed me, belittled me, and accused me of being too dramatic. Screenshots of my brother's posts, flaunting the expensive lifestyle my parents had funded by draining my savings years ago. I still remembered how it felt to open my bank account and realize it was nearly empty, how my mother justified it by saying, "It's for your brother's future, you'll understand one day." I never did, and I never would. Now, their future was unraveling. The last I'd heard, my brother's business, the one they stole my money to support, was barely holding together. Rumors spread about unpaid debts and clients pulling out. The company's name was quietly losing its glow. And the best part? They didn't know that one of the firms they were trying to impress had already partnered with me. That was the beauty of moving in silence. By the time they realized, it would already be too late. A few weeks before the event, I received a message from an unfamiliar number. "Mom, hi sweetheart. It's been so long. I heard you're doing well. Maybe we could meet?" I stared at the message for a long time, my hands still. I hadn't heard her call me sweetheart in years. The word felt hollow now, like a cheap attempt to rewrite history. She must have seen something online. Maybe a post, maybe a rumor. It didn't matter. What mattered was that she reached out, and that told me everything. They needed me again. I didn't reply immediately. I let days pass. Then, finally, I answered simply, "Me. I've been busy. But maybe soon." She replied within seconds. "Mom, that's wonderful. We miss you. Everyone does. We'd love to see you. Maybe we can all come to your award ceremony? We heard you're nominated. My lips curled into a slow, quiet smile. So that was it. They wanted to come now that there'd be cameras, photographers, and applause. They wanted to stand beside me, to pretend they'd always been supportive. The same people who told me I was wasting my life now wanted to bask in the glow of what I'd built. I could have said no, but where's the satisfaction in that? So I said yes. The following weeks were filled with rehearsed calm. I acted polite when my mother called, distant but cordial. I let her believe I'd softened, that time had healed the wound she inflicted. Meanwhile, I coordinated every detail behind the scenes, not out of cruelty, but clarity. I wanted them to see the contrast between who I used to be and who I had become, between the child they controlled and the adult they could no longer touch. When the day of the ceremony finally arrived, I stood in front of the mirror and barely recognized myself. Confidence had reshaped me. It was in my posture, my eyes, even the way I adjusted my suit. I wasn't that quiet, hesitant person anymore. I was the culmination of every insult they'd thrown at me. I was proof that I never needed their approval to succeed. Outside the event hall, luxury cars lined the street, and a red carpet stretched toward the grand entrance. I arrived early, not to make an impression, but to take it all in. The crowd, the laughter, the distant flashes of cameras, it was all surreal. Yet I felt calm, centered. I greeted the hosts, posed for a few photos, and took my seat near the front. Then I saw them. My family entered together, my parents leading, my brother trailing behind. Their faces a mixture of awe and nervous pride. They looked so out of place among the polished crowd. My mother's eyes scanned the room until they landed on me, and she waved enthusiastically, as if we'd never fought, never shouted, never cut each other out. I nodded politely, my expression unreadable. The game had begun. The ceremony moved slowly, each speech and award a buildup of tension I didn't need to force. I could feel their eyes on me constantly, waiting for the moment my name would be called. My mother whispered something to my father, who smiled, already rehearsing the pride he'd perform when cameras turned our way. But they didn't know what was waiting. Because when my category finally came, when the announcer called my name and applause filled the hall, I stood and walked to the stage knowing exactly what this moment meant. I accepted the award with grace, thanked my team, and smiled at the cameras. My voice didn't tremble. My hands didn't shake. When I looked out at the audience, I saw my family watching, smiling wide, believing they were part of my triumph. But I knew what came next would erase that illusion forever. When I stepped down from that stage, the applause still echoing through the hall, I didn't look at my family right away. I wanted them to sit with the image of me standing under those lights, confident, composed, unshaken. The contrast between that moment and every time they'd called me a failure was more than enough to sting. But this wasn't about temporary sting. This was about truth, raw, undeniable truth. As the ceremony moved into the dinner portion, servers glided between tables, placing plates of roasted vegetables, glazed salmon, and sparkling glasses of water. My family sat 2 tables away, their chatter loud enough to hear. My mother's laugh was forced, almost desperate. My father's voice carried that familiar edge of control. He really turned things around, didn't he? Someone nearby whispered. Isaac, the one who owns that new design firm. His story's all over the papers this week. I caught my father's glance. He heard it too. His jaw tightened before he forced a smile at the guests around him. My mother leaned closer to him, whispering something, probably reminding him to look proud for the cameras. I stayed quiet. I wanted to see how long they'd pretend. Halfway through the dinner, one of the event coordinators approached me. Mr. Hale, she said softly. Just confirming. You requested the short presentation before the closing remarks? I smiled. Yes, thank you. Her words made my father's head snap up. He looked confused, his brows furrowing. Presentation? He mouthed. I gave him a polite nod. When the lights dimmed slightly, the coordinator returned to the stage and said, Before we close, tonight's winner, Mr. Isaac Hale, has prepared something special to share. I walked up again, calm, collected, with that same stillness that once came from silence, not confidence. But this time, I owned the silence. It belonged to me. The projector behind me flickered to life, displaying a simple slide, a journey to independence. I wasn't planning to speak again. I began, my voice carrying easily through the quiet room. But tonight isn't just about an award. It's about the path that led here, the people who taught me what strength really means. And sometimes, I added slowly, my eyes flicking toward my parents' table, those lessons come from pain. I saw my mother's smile falter. My brother shifted in his chair. I continued, pacing slowly. A few years ago, I was told I wasn't good enough, that my ideas were childish, that I was an embarrassment. My savings, everything I worked for, was taken from me to fund someone else's dream. I was told to stay quiet about it, that it was for the family. Murmurs rippled through the audience. My father's knuckles turned white around his fork. I clicked to the next slide, a photo of my early sketches, drawn at that cramped desk in my old apartment. Then another, my first workshop, tiny but full of heart. Then another, a contract signed with one of the city's largest companies. This, I said, gesturing to the images, is what happens when you stop trying to earn love that was never meant for you. When you build for yourself, not for the approval of those who only show up once success is certain. I turned back to them briefly. Because family isn't just who you're born to. It's who stands beside you when no one else will. The room erupted in applause, but I barely heard it. My mother looked pale. My father sat rigid, eyes darting toward the crowd that was now turning toward them, whispers swelling like a tide. My brother's jaw twitched. He couldn't even look at me. After the event, guests began approaching me, shaking my hand, congratulating me, asking questions about my company. Cameras flashed. People asked for interviews. My parents stayed seated at their table, invisible now. No one congratulated them. No one asked for a family photo. It was perfect. When the crowd thinned and the music softened, I approached their table. The air was heavy. My mother spoke first, her voice brittle. That speech, that wasn't necessary, Isaac. I met her gaze. It was honest. You humiliated us, she hissed quietly, her hand trembling around her clutch. No, I said evenly. I told the truth. If that humiliated you, then maybe you finally understand how I felt. My father stood abruptly, his tone sharp. You think this makes you better than us? You're still part of this family whether you like it or not. I looked at him for a long moment, letting the silence stretch until even he seemed unsure. No, I said softly. I was. You made sure I wouldn't be again. And with that, I turned to leave. But before I could take another step, a familiar voice, the event's senior organizer, stopped me. Mr. Hale, she said, smiling warmly. We're finalizing the dinner bills. Would you like your family's charges added to yours as before? The timing was perfect, unplanned, yet poetic. I glanced at my father, whose expression shifted instantly from anger to awkwardness. My mother opened her mouth, then closed it again. I smiled faintly at the organizer. No, I said. I think they can handle their own this time. Her eyes widened slightly, realizing the weight of the moment, and she nodded politely before walking away. The silence that followed was cutting. My father's hand tightened at his side, but he said nothing. My mother looked down, her face flushed. My brother's shoulders slumped. I didn't need to raise my voice or deliver a final line. Everything had already been said. Outside, the night air was cool, clean, the kind that carries the faint scent of rain on stone. I walked slowly toward the car waiting by the curb, the city lights reflecting off the glass buildings like quiet applause. My assistant held the door open, smiling. Congratulations again, sir. That speech was incredible. Thank you, I said, sliding in. But before the car door closed, I looked back one last time through the glass entrance of the hall. My family stood together, but not the way they used to. My father arguing quietly with the staff. My mother clutching her purse, trying to hide her embarrassment. My brother standing apart, looking lost. For the first time, I didn't feel angry, just free, because the truth was, revenge had never really been about destruction. It was about release. It was about balance, about letting the truth speak louder than the lies they'd built around me. They would have to live with what they saw tonight. They would have to live with knowing that I had become everything they said I couldn't be, and I did it without them. I leaned back in the seat, watching the hall fade behind me as the car pulled away. The city stretched ahead, wide, open, and mine. And somewhere deep inside, the silence that had once hurt me now felt like peace. That night, for the first time in years, I didn't dream of being seen or heard. I just dreamed of what came next, a life finally lived on my own terms. Because walking away wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of theirs, the one where they'd finally have to sit with what they'd done and realize. They had lost me forever,